In the Qingkun continent, martial strength reigns supreme, and the weak are nothing but stepping stones. Warriors are divided into 9 ranks, from the lowest to the pinnacle of power. Legend says that a 9th-rank master could overturn the heavens and take on 10,000 enemies single-handedly. But in the eastern continent, there is a nation so fearsome that no force or fighter dares to challenge it. Wu Chao, the dynasty that boasts the youngest 9th-rank warrior in history. That warrior is none other than the Empress Wu Xin herself. And yet, this extraordinary empress has a fiancé, one who could not be more different from her. In the middle of court, Wen Ming casually places a hand on her leg, calling her my dear wife, as if they were in private. An official immediately snaps, "This is indecent behavior in the court. Where are your manners?" Minister Jirenyi steps forward, accusing Wen Ming of disrupting the imperial court and demanding punishment. He insists the marriage be annulled and Wen Ming stripped of his title reduced to a commoner. A chorus of officials echoes the demand. Annul the marriage. Demote him. Wen Ming roars back, "You bunch of old relics are always trying to sabotage my dream of living off the royal treasury." He then reflects on his past life. "My name is Wen Ming. I was just an ordinary office worker back on Earth. Fresh out of college, he fell for his boss's empty promises and ended up working himself to the bone. Until one day, he collapsed and died right in front of his computer screen. But he got a second chance, reincarnated as the son of the Marquis of Northern Pacification, a golden ticket to a comfortable life. He thought he could coast on his family's wealth, but his father was ordered to guard the northern frontier and took everyone with him. His father took his mother, the servants, and all the fortune, leaving Wen Ming alone with nothing. His plans for a lazy life went up in smoke. But the universe was not done with him yet. Before leaving, his father had left behind a marriage contract made with the previous emperor. The future Empress, Wu Xin, was his fiancée. From then on, her hobbies became his hobbies. Her demands became his commands. And so, flattering the Empress became his new life's mission, the ultimate shortcut to an easy existence. He figured if he could cling to her coattails, he could slack off and never relive his tragic past life. But Wu Xin was not having it. "You do not need to use your face for a massage. Get up," she scolded him. "How many times do I have to say it? I am the emperor now. Do not act like we are still children." Wen Ming mumbled, "Sorry. It will not happen again." Privately, he grumbled, "Teenage girls are such a hassle. If it were not for this cushy deal, I would not bother with you." Jirenyi seized the opportunity. "Your Majesty, he touched your sacred body without permission. I accuse him of disrespect." Wen Ming shot back, "I was just loosening your muscles for your health. A healthy empress means a stable kingdom. You old fools are just trying to drive a wedge between us." Jirenyi countered, "Slandering a high minister is an even greater crime. Punish him." Wen Ming was not about to let Jirenyi have the last word, shooting back and accusing the old minister of plotting to marry his son to the empress. But the empress had enough and slammed her hand down, roaring for silence. She reminded everyone she had called the court to discuss state affairs, not to bicker like children. The ministers immediately bowed their heads, muttering apologies and not daring to anger her further. Wen Ming, however, smirked and pointed at them, saying his wife had seen through their hypocritical faces. He then brazenly promised that after the wedding, he would make them all kneel and sing. The empress turned her sharp gaze on him next, a warning in her voice. She reminded him they were only engaged, so he was not to call her wife until the ceremony, and Wen Ming nodded frantically. As she tried to steer back to business, Wen Ming muttered about making her taste his family's rules after marriage. Wu Xin caught him mumbling and asked what he said, but he quickly covered it up by offering a massage again. She refused and redirected attention to the urgent northern border report. Minister Jirenyi stepped forward, informing that scouts reported the barbarians were mobilizing a large force. He warned that the barbarians might take advantage of the Empress's recent ascension to launch an invasion. Wen Ming interrupted, telling her not to worry. His father was unbeatable. He boasted that his father, the Marquis of Northern Pacification, would never let a single barbarian cross the border. Wu Xin admitted that although Wen Ming was an idiot, his father was indeed a fierce warrior. But a sudden shout echoed from the entrance. "Urgent report." A messenger rushed in, clutching an 800-lie urgent dispatch from the north. The messenger, named Shui Yo, knelt and presented the scroll to the Empress. Wen Ming, still oblivious, assumed it was a victory report, laughing that his father must have crushed the barbarians already. He turned to the other officials and smugly told them to take notes on how real officials worked. The Empress ordered the messenger to read it aloud, and Wen Ming excitedly told him to speak loudly about his father's great deeds. The messenger began, "Urgent dispatch yesterday. The barbarians invaded with 200,000 men. Lord Wentian led the troops to counterattack at noon." Wen Ming nodded proudly. In the evening, during the battle, the Marquis of Northern Pacification turned his coat and defected to the barbarians. The color drained from Wen Ming's face as shock and disbelief flooded his eyes, tears welling up. Before he could react, Shueyo grabbed him, and he let out a pained scream. Ziwei demanded instructions on how to punish the traitor's son, while Wen Ming struggled, shouting that his father must have been framed. Jirenyi sneered, accusing him of still daring to talk back. He pressed on, claiming he had always known the Marquis harbored ambitions and that the son was surely a spy for the barbarians. The officials chimed in, each demanding a harsher punishment: beheading, dismemberment, death by 1,000 cuts. Talk about a bloodthirsty crowd. Wen Ming could not believe his ears. He complained that no father should betray his son like that, and if his dad was going to rebel, he could have at least taken him along. He muttered to himself, recounting how he had barely tasted a single good day in this world, enduring all that groveling just so he could marry the Empress and live the easy life. But now his own father had backstabbed him. No way was he going to die a meaningless death again. So he turned to the Empress, begging her to give him a chance to investigate the truth, reminding her of their childhood bond. The Empress considered for a moment and then said she would not kill him. Wen Ming's eyes lit up, hardly believing his ears. But the officials were not done. They urged her not to be soft-hearted, insisting that traitors must be rooted out entirely, and demanding his execution. Wu Xin slammed her hand down, silencing them. She declared that Wen Ming would not die, but he would not go unpunished either. Wen Ming quickly agreed, saying he accepted the punishment. He thought all that flattery had paid off, and as long as he kept breathing, there was still hope. The Empress ordered Jueyai to throw him into the imperial prison, and Jueyai acknowledged the command. Then she added the killer detail. She would have the imperial physician prepare to castrate him and make him a eunuch in the palace. Oof, talk about a brutal plot twist. The scene shifted to an aerial view of the palace complex, a sprawling traditional structure surrounded by gardens and water. This was where Wen Ming's new life was about to begin, if you could even call it a life. In the Fuhui Palace, Wu Xin gently brushed her fingers through a companion's hair, her mind elsewhere. Later, soaking in a rose-scented bath, she brooded over the northern barbarian invasion and the sudden rebellion of the Zhenbei Marquis, despite his son being held hostage in the capital. She could not figure out why the Marquis would risk everything, especially when the panic in his son's eyes seemed genuine. Just then, her cheerful friend Sisi bounced in, asking who had put such a gloomy look on the Empress's face. Sisi pretended to ponder, a mischievous grin spreading across her lips. Before Wu Xin could answer, Sisi's hands wandered, and she squealed about how amazing the Empress's figure felt. She kept gushing about the softness, until Wu Xin swatted her hands away, scolding her for never breaking the habit. Sisi just laughed it off, saying it was Wu Xin's own fault for having such a great body. Wu Xin rolled her eyes, but Sisi continued her playful teasing. Under her breath, Wu Xin muttered that Sisi's own changes over the years were even more ridiculous. Sisi caught only a murmur and asked what she said, but Wu Xin quickly brushed it off with a nothing. Changing the subject, Wu Xin asked if Sisi should still be training on the mountain, but Sisi boasted she had already mastered everything her master had to teach. Though admitted, her master said she needed to temper her wild nature. But as soon as the Empress ascended, she was sent down to help. Sisi declared she was ready to assist in governing the realm and swore by the 8 trigram sect to solve all the Empress's problems. She knelt in sincerity, vowing to share any burden, and Wu Xin felt a swell of gratitude. The Empress knew she could rely on Sisi's loyalty, but still hesitated to reveal her true dilemma. Finally, Wu Xin admitted there was something she needed to discuss. Sisi immediately perked up, guessing court conflicts or a prince's rebellion, and Wu Xin had to tell her to be serious. Stammering, Wu Xin began with the classic line, "I have a friend who..." The friend once owed a great debt to a senior, so to repay it, she agreed to marry the senior's son. For over a decade, her childhood friend had been doting and attentive, but now the senior had defected to the enemy. And now, with the wedding approaching, she did not know if her fiancé truly loved her or would eventually turn against her. The weight of uncertainty pressed down as she feared the boy might follow his father's path. Sisi's eyes widened as she caught on, but Wu Xin quickly denied it was about herself. Sisi snorted, calling that friend an idiot for worrying over such a simple matter. She quoted her master, "A man's mouth may lie, but his body will always betray the truth, so why not send a trusted person to test the fiancé's loyalty?" A spark lit in Wu Xin's eyes. "Perfect, I have made my decision." Sisi asked what, and Wu Xin declared that Sisi would be the one to seduce her fiancé. And with that, the scene shifted to a quiet chamber elsewhere in the palace, where a different kind of scheme was about to unfold. In a chamber nearby, the palace eunuch asked the terrified young man if he was ready. "Not ready at all," he stammered, clearly panicking. He pleaded his innocence, insisting the Empress's words were just to appease the ministers, begging the eunuch not to go through with it. But the eunuch told him to be quiet, reminding him that with his father's rebellion, if he did not cut off the boy's little head, his own big head would roll. "It'll only hurt for a second," he said, with no way out. Civilization thought, "I really going to be the first transmigrator to become a eunuch? Talk about a nightmare scenario." Suddenly, the door slammed open with a loud bang, startling everyone. Sisi burst in, holding an imperial scroll. "By the Empress's decree, the execution of the traitor's son's castration has been reassigned," she announced. Civilization sobbed internally, thinking the Empress still cared. The eunuch checked the scroll, but Sisi confirmed it was genuine. "Her Majesty has ordered that I, Tao Si Si, personally carry out the castration of the traitor's son," she declared with a grin. Civilization immediately backpedaled, begging the eunuch to do it instead, but the eunuch just scurried away, muttering, "I am out of here." Our hero cried out, "Did not the Empress say she'd spare me?" Is that sword for castration or execution? I bet this is a setup. Sisi told him to be grateful, as the Empress had chosen the smartest and cutest girl in the universe to be his paired partner in the palace. Paired partner? I do not want you. My heart belongs only to the Empress. Civilization protested. Enough talk. Sisi raised the blade. Civilization screamed for her to stop, but then she paused, noticing something odd. Sisi's eyes went wide, tears forming as she stared at his situation. What is this? She muttered to herself. How am I supposed to cut this? Just slice it all off. Civilization was mortified. If you do not know what you are doing, do not make things worse. With a clumsy swipe, blood sprayed everywhere. Off-screen, a voice quipped, and so the Great Wu dynasty gained another eunuch. Great. Sisi screamed. Why are you just standing there? Help me stop the bleeding. Then she paused, a dazed look on her face. Oh, I think I forgot something. And she fainted, muttering, I am afraid of blood. Civilization yelled in agony. Could not you have stopped the bleeding before passing out? Classic. That night, the Palace of Respectful Affairs glowed under the moonlight, quiet and still. The young man lying inside, however, was far from peaceful. He grumbled about the crazy palace maid who had been way too vicious to him. Luckily, that idiot fainted at the sight of blood and never noticed she'd only cut his thigh. Otherwise, he'd be a real eunuch by now. Talk about a close call. He knew this was a fluke. If anyone discovered he was not truly castrated, both his head and his pride would be forfeit. Suddenly, a knock on the door jolted him from his thoughts. Sisi entered, leading the so-called eunuch expert, no less than the Grand Intendant of the Inner Palace himself. The old man humbly denied being an expert, but Sisi insisted. The Grand Intendant, Eunuch Hai, was a seasoned veteran who had seen countless new eunuchs over the years. Seeing Wen trembling, Sisi asked if that was normal. Eunuch Hai played along, claiming the boy was just hiding his tears. The old eunuch said he understood the pain, but Wen cursed inwardly. You do not know anything. If it were not for the secret, Wen would have loved to smash that old eunuch's face in. Sisi tried to cheer him up, saying they could be good sisters now since he'd lost just a little flesh. She poked him playfully, making a silly sound. She asked if he was really that upset about being a eunuch. Wen wailed. It hurts so much. But, of course, it was all an act. Sisi then asked Eunuch Hai about his own recovery time. The eunuch gave a vague answer, saying it varied. Eunuch Hai assured everyone that Wen was out of danger and that the palace had gained another excellent colleague. Wen thought darkly. When my father rebels, I will have you all killed. Eunuch Hai took his leave, entrusting Sisi with Wen's care. Wen silently added, and you, crazy girl, you'll get yours too. Feigning politeness, Wen called Sisi the most brilliant and beautiful girl ever, and asked if she could please leave him alone. She just stared back silently. Instead, she announced that the Empress herself had assigned her as his designated partner to look after his meals and daily needs. I am basically your caretaker now, she said. Wen immediately suspected she was a spy. His stomach growled, betraying his hunger. Sisi noticed and mentioned he had not eaten since his capture. She produced some food, and Wen grudgingly admitted the Empress had at least shown a little conscience. Before he could protest, Sisi shoved a pastry into his mouth. Open wide, she commanded. She kept feeding him, saying he needed to eat to recover. Wen could only whimper as he was force-fed. This only deepened Wen's suspicion that she was trying to kill him with kindness, or maybe just kill him. After just 2 bites, he pretended to fall asleep. Sisi was puzzled. How could he be out so fast? She shrugged and decided to clean the courtyard instead, thinking she might actually have a gift for caregiving. Left alone, Wen grumbled about how terrible this palace was. He coughed weakly, genuinely feeling awful. He was convinced he'd die if he stayed. Luckily, his guard was just this weak girl. If he could take her out, he could escape. Later, Wen crept out of the room and stealthily approached Sisi, who was sweeping the yard, a wooden club in his hand. Sisi was muttering about an annoying artificial mountain in her way, and stooped to clean beneath it. Suddenly, she turned and spotted him. Xiao Wenzi, why are you up? Wen quickly improvised. I need to use the toilet. Sisi eyed the wooden club in his hand and asked if he really needed that just to go to the toilet. Wen stammered lamely, caught off guard. With a sheepish grin, he claimed he could barely walk without something to lean on after his recent operation. Sisi sighed and told him to be careful. As he shuffled away, Wen muttered to himself about how someone so small could be so strong, and the absurdly large knife she'd used. Talk about an isekai full of surprises. Rounding a corner, Sisi came face to face with the Empress. Ding Xingjie? She blurted out in surprise. Wu Xin immediately scolded her for going too far. She was only supposed to scare him, not actually castrate him. Sisi shrugged, blaming his ugly anatomy for the accident. Sisi pointed out the obvious. Wen was now a full-fledged eunuch. No going back. Wu Xin threw up her hands in frustration. How was she supposed to test his loyalty now? What was the point? Sisi teased the Empress, asking if she had feelings for Wen. Wu Xin's face flushed as she denied it vehemently. She quickly rationalized, claiming that a eunuch had no ambition, so she could never uncover any rebellion plot. Yeah, that was definitely the reason. But Sisi assured her she had a plan. Wu Xin leaned in, curious. According to Sisi's genius observation, The walls around the palace toilets were low. If Wen had rebellious intentions, he'd surely try to escape while pretending to relieve himself. And she had already set a trap outside with no guards in sight. It was the perfect snare. If he took the bait and climbed over, it would confirm his traitor status beyond doubt. Back in his room, Wen was plotting his escape. This little palace thinks it can hold me. Once I find my father, I will take her throne. Sisi suggested torture to extract a confession, but Wu Xin recoiled. That is a bit too much, she protested. A piercing scream echoed from the courtyard. Sisi's eyes lit up. He must have fallen into my trap. Sisi dashed off to catch him red-handed, while Wu Xin stood frozen, whispering in anguish. Wen, were you lying to me all along? Meanwhile, in another part of the palace, a different plot was unfolding. Eunuch Hai addressed his subordinates, ordering them to stay alert and ignore anything untoward. They responded with a unified yes. A bird swooped down, delivering a rolled message to Eunuch Hai. He opened it, his eyes narrowing as he read. I see. A sinister smile spread across his face. So that thing is indeed in the Wen kid's hands, he murmured. Sisi cackled with delight. Ha ha ha, this time I have finally caught you, genius that I am. She shouted. Do not think of escaping. But then a puzzled huh escaped her lips as she and Wen Ming locked eyes. Sisi discovered Wen Ming in the latrine, and blood splattered all over her face as she yelped in surprise. So much blood, she cried, and Wu Xin rushed over, shouting Sisi, in alarm. Wen Ming snapped. Are you perverts? Who watches a eunuch take a dump? While Wu Xin hurriedly insisted, wait, this is a misunderstanding. Not only did you castrate me, he seethed, but now you humiliate me like this. Fine, I will give you a good look, he declared bitterly. See how pathetic your former consort, now a eunuch, has become. Wu Xin panicked. Whoa. Wait, it is all a misunderstanding. But Wen Ming only laughed maniacally. Ha ha ha. Look, why are not you looking? Burn this ugly sight into your brains. I told you, Wu Xin repeated desperately. It is a misunderstanding. Grabbing Sisi, she apologized. Sorry. Let us get out of here. And they fled. Wen Ming exhaled in relief. Finally, I managed to fool them. Back in her chambers, Wu Xin shook Sisi awake. Look at your brilliant idea. I have lost face in front of Wen Ming. Sisi winced. Ow, my face is being torn off, but added, he is just a little eunuch now. He would not dare spread it. That makes me even angrier. Wu Xin fumed. Who told you to actually castrate him? Sisi whimpered. I admit my mistake. I did not realize his injury was so severe. Ashin mused that even going to the toilet sprayed so much blood. Sisi groaned. It hurts. Wu Xin issued a decree. Tao Si Si, hear me. I give you an additional task. No tricks this time. You must take care of Wen Ming and heal his wounds. Sisi bowed. Your servant obeys. I am going back now, Wu Xin said, turning to leave. Be good to Wen Ming. Sisi replied meekly. Yes, but privately, Wu Xin thought. At least, he did not truly betray me. Meanwhile, Wen Ming grumbled. They even follow me to the toilet. They are starting to suspect, he realized. Too bad the wound opened when I climbed the wall. Otherwise I would not have to put up with this crap to escape the palace. Sisi, however, was not fooled. I am not as easy to deceive as Sister Wu Xin. I will expose your true identity. Wen Ming returned to his room, finally alone. After being tormented by that crazy woman all day and losing so much blood, he sighed, collapsing. Finally, I can rest properly. Though there was a chance to escape in the toilet, he mused. I am not putting all my hopes in one place. I have seen plenty of movies from my past life. If I dig through the palace sewer, I can definitely escape. But Sisi's voice rang out. Little Wen, come give me a hand. She caught him sneaking around. What are you up to? He stammered. Nothing. Just resting after too much bleeding. Do you take me for an idiot? She shot back. I can see guilt written all over your face. He could only mutter. Oh. Wen Ming protested. Wait, this is my room. Why are you here? And what is with all these things? Sisi smirked. The Empress ordered me to take care of your daily needs, so naturally I am living with you. Wen Ming's eyes widened as she started undressing. Talk if you want, but why are you taking off your clothes? Sisi shot him a sharp look, demanding to know why he was panicking. She casually added that even if she stripped completely, what could a little eunuch like him do anyway? According to the old woman, sleepy men were most likely to spill the truth, and Sisi was not about to miss this golden chance for information. Wen Ming stammered that even as a eunuch, this was really inappropriate. With a yelp, he asked what on earth she was doing. She replied sweetly that she was just helping him apply medicine. He insisted he could do it himself. No need for her help. Sisi snapped at him to stop talking nonsense. She did not want to get punished by the Empress. Wen Ming shot back. Do not? You know men and women should not touch? Internally, he cursed her crazy mind paired with an annoyingly perfect body. She laughed. What man are you? A eunuch. He panicked, thinking if this kept up. He realized that if she continued, she'd discover he was not actually castrated without even needing to check. And worse, his body was reacting. Wen Ming grumbled about her rough handling while applying medicine, and how strong she was. He thought it is over. Sisi noticed something hidden on him and demanded to know what it was. He decided he had no choice but to use the old trick again. She saw through his bluff and shouted that he was using the same trick. Blood sprayed everywhere as he faked another wound. Sisi cried out at all the blood, but Wen Ming sighed in relief that he dodged that bullet. A black-clothed man appeared, looking confused. He grumbled that crazy woman had not only ruined him, but also stolen his bed. Determined not to be exposed any longer, he resolved to speed up his escape plan. In her sleep, Sisi giggled and demanded that he come clean, while Wen Ming gritted his teeth. He complained that she interrogated him even in her dreams, and her sleeping posture was atrocious. Sisi sleep-talked about grabbing him now, making him jump. She mumbled about having his weakness. She groped around, shouting that she'd got it, causing Wen Ming to silently beg for death. He thanked his stars she had bad sleeping posture. Otherwise, being grabbed till morning would have exposed everything. Wen Ming lamented his unlucky fate and slowly got up. Still sleeping, Sisi murmured. Little Wen, what are you hiding down there? He froze in horror. Sisi leaned in again, cooing. Little Wen, what exactly are you hiding down there? She reached out and poked, asking what that hard thing was, completely clueless about the awkward situation she was causing. Wen Ming panicked, yelping that she could not touch there, and mentally cursed that both his heads were about to get chopped off. But Sisi was not backing down, demanding to see what it was. Then she deadpanned, "It is just a spoon? Why are you carrying a spoon around?" Wen Ming awkwardly explained he got hungry last night and snuck some food. Sisi scoffed, calling it boring, and dropped the subject. Wen Ming breathed a sigh of relief, thinking how close he'd come to being exposed. Good thing he'd hidden the spoon under him. Sisi switched gears, reminding him she promised the emperor to take care of him, so he had to get up for breakfast. Wen Ming asked warily what exactly she meant by breakfast, while Sisi started rummaging around. With a mischievous grin, she announced, "White and fluffy steamed buns, of course." Wen Ming screamed in horror, telling her to stay away. 7 days later, Hai Gong Gong showed up, announcing it was time for little Wen to start learning how to serve the master. Sisi happened to walk in and greeted the eunuch cheerfully. Wen Ming, still sniffling, claimed he was fine and could move normally, but his tears told a different story. Hai Gong Gong raised an eyebrow, saying he did not look fine at all, and suggested a few more days of rest. Wen Ming immediately jumped up, begging to be taken anywhere else, and Hai Gong Gong had to tell him to calm down and not dirty his robe. With that, Hai Gong Gong led Wen Ming away, while Sisi cheerfully waved them off, telling the eunuch to take good care of him. Once they were gone, Sisi's smile faded as she thought out loud. 7 days without a slip-up. Maybe Wen Ming really was not involved in the rebellion after all. Outside, Wen Ming vowed he'd do anything to escape that woman's care, and Hai Gong Gong chuckled, saying he probably could not handle hard labor in the palace. Hai Gong Gong assured him that as a former consort, he'd get a cushy job. Wen Ming thanked him profusely, but inwardly, Wen Ming was suspicious. The old eunuch's sudden friendliness felt off. What was he planning? Scene change. Hai Gong Gong called little Wen into a room. He assigned Wen Ming the job of tasting the emperor's food for poison. Wen Ming's eyes lit up with excitement. Hai Gong Gong warned him to only take 1 bite per dish, or the emperor would get angry. Wen Ming nodded, saying he knew the rules, but then took a comically huge bite. Hai Gong Gong gasped, "That is way too big." Hai Gong Gong sighed, letting him eat more, but muttered under his breath that if Wen Ming were not useful, he'd kill him right there. Suddenly, Wen Ming got emotional, telling Hai Gong Gong he was the only one who'd been kind to him since entering the palace. He dropped to his knees and asked to be accepted as a foster son. Hai Gong Gong protested, saying Jinbai Ho was still alive, but Wen Ming passionately denounced his own father as a traitor unworthy of being a dad. Hai Gong Gong played along, calling him a righteous child, and the two embraced in a fake father-son bond, each with their own hidden agenda. Behind his grateful facade, Wen Ming was already plotting to use the old eunuch as a stepping stone until he found his own father. Just wait, he thought. I will make you call me ancestor. Hai Gong Gong, on the other hand, was equally deceptive. He sneered inwardly, thinking Wen Ming was a fool for falling for such a small favor, and planned to get rid of him once he got what he wanted. Still hungry after tasting the imperial dishes, Wen Ming suggested adding more courses for the emperor so he could eat more, but Hai Gong Gong cut him off, telling him to hold on. The eunuch explained that palace food was mostly for show, not filling, so they'd go somewhere else to eat. Under his breath, he muttered that this kid must be a pig reincarnated to have eaten so much and still be hungry. Wen Ming hesitated, pointing out that it was his first day on the job, and he should not be skipping work. But Hai Gong Gong waved it off, saying that as his foster father, such minor details did not matter. Perfect, thought Hai Gong Gong. This was a chance to check if that legendary technique was on Wen Ming's person. He told the boy to change into some sharp clothes and follow him, and Wen Ming eagerly agreed. Scene shift to a bustling street at night. Wen Ming's eyes went wide as he realized they were in the pleasure district, with courtesans calling out from balconies. "This is a brothel?" he stammered. "You said we were going to eat," Wen Ming protested. "Are not we a bit too bold, 2 eunuchs visiting a brothel?" But Hai Gong Gong just smirked, saying no one would know who they were, and shoved him inside. A smiling hostess welcomed them, promising that their girls would satisfy. Wen Ming was completely flustered, not knowing where to look. Hai Gong told him to relax and enjoy himself, all expenses paid. Wen Ming reluctantly muttered an okay, still uneasy. While Wen Ming was distracted, Hai Gong quietly instructed the madam to send their most beautiful courtesan to attend the young master and report his every move. The madam nodded and hurried off. Alone, Hai Gong pondered the legend. The invincible Zhen Baiho owed his strength to a miraculous technique that could regrow limbs and heal the dead. If it was true, he must have passed it to his son. 7 days was enough for a severed body part to regrow. So if Wen Ming actually did anything with the courtesan, it would prove the technique existed. A maidservant led Wen Ming to a lavish room and told him to wait. Suspicious. He wondered what the old eunuch's real game was in bringing him to a brothel. But someone else was watching. Sisi, who had been tailing them, muttered to herself, "This guy, he is definitely up to something." The madam of the brothel leaned in with a knowing smile, boasting that their courtesan was a rare beauty from the western regions, so exclusive even the most elite young masters could barely get a glimpse. Wen Ming's mind raced as he realized that Hai Gong, fully aware of his disguise as a eunuch, had brought him here. Could this be another test from that scheming little empress? Playing it cool, he waved a hand and said he was not all that interested in the courtesan himself, and would rather just get some extra dishes. The madam chuckled at his bluff. She teased that once he saw the lady, he'd change his tune and want to devour her instead. But Wen Ming was not buying it. He was convinced the old madam was in cahoots with Hai Gong, watching his every move, and he'd have to be extra careful not to slip up. Just then, a voice from outside announced the arrival of Ruyan, the courtesan of Chonghua Tower. When she stepped in, Wen Ming's jaw dropped. This was the legendary Western beauty. She looked more like an alien than a celestial maiden. Serving girl nearby snickered, calling him an uncultured bumpkin. Wen Ming was taken aback, wondering if she meant him, but the girl just offered a flat welcome. A soft click echoed as the doors opened wider, and the serving girl formally invited Ruyan to make her grand entrance. The courtesan glided in with an apologetic smile, introducing herself as Lu Ruyan, the prized flower of Chonghua Tower. Wen Ming stammered, barely managing a flustered "No, it is fine." But inside, he was cursing Hai Gong for thinking a foreign vixen could seduce him. Ruyan reached out and touched his burning cheek, playfully asking if the heat was making him sweat and blush so much. Wen Ming yelped, "Too close." He squeezed his eyes shut, chanting a mantra to block out temptation, while Ruyan burst into laughter at his flustered reaction. She invited him to sit and let her feed him some fruit to quench his thirst. Outside, the serving girl whispered to the madam that no man could keep a secret from Ruyan, and the madam agreed, snickering that Wen Ming was clearly a clueless virgin. Suddenly, the madam's eyes went wide as she saw someone unexpected, her mouth hanging open in shock. Inside, Ruyan sweetly told Wen Ming to open wide. He tried to resist, insisting he could feed himself, but his inner voice screamed at him to stay strong. Ruyan tilted her head with a mischievous grin, suggesting that if he wanted her to feed him in a different way, that would not be proper at all. Wen Ming's thoughts boiled over. This demoness was impossible to resist. Privately, Ruyan smirked, thinking that this little eunuch was easy to manipulate with a bit of teasing, and hooking his heart would make her scheme go smoothly. But a commotion outside interrupted them as someone shouted that a young Master Jia was demanding to see Ruyan. The door flew open, and Jia Zhengdao barged in, bragging that his father was the prime minister, and ordering everyone to step aside. Wen Ming's heart sank when he recognized the man. Jia Zhengdao, the notorious brat. This was bad news. He imagined Jia catching him in a brothel and reporting it to the little empress, who'd have him executed. The thought sent chills down his spine. With no other choice, he resolved to bluff his way through as Ruyan called out to him. Jia announced loudly that he was celebrating because he'd heard Wen Ming had been castrated, which made his day. He then demanded that the top courtesan serve him wine to flaunt his status, ignoring the madam's flustered protests. Jia Zhengdao tossed a bag of silver at the madam, bragging that he had plenty to spare. Peeking through the door, Hai Gong cursed under his breath at the meddling brat who was ruining his carefully laid plans. Jia demanded to see the legendary Western beauty, eager to judge her with his own eyes. Ruyan smoothly lied that the previous guest had fled out the window upon hearing Jia's fearsome reputation. Hai Gong nodded from the shadows, satisfied that the courtesan knew how to handle the situation. Hidden beneath her skirt, Wen Ming silently cheered, thinking Ruyan was doing a great job of fobbing off the arrogant jerk. Ruyan reminded herself to stay calm, remembering that this eunuch was useful to her plans and could not be exposed yet. Jia praised Ruyan as a country-toppling beauty and called himself lucky to finally meet her, while she modestly dismissed the flattery. Jia grinned in approval, but Ruyan's inner thoughts were cold. She would not let this playboy touch her, not after having to serve a eunuch already. Playing the gracious hostess, Ruyan offered to pour Jia some wine to soothe his travels, biding her time. Jia, now alone with her, dropped all pretense and told her to stop acting modest. But Ruyan firmly stated she was a pure performer who sold only artistry. Scoffing, Jia declared he'd see just how pure she really was, and a sharp crack echoed through the room. Suddenly, Jia's eyes went wide as he stared at Ruyan, caught off guard by something unexpected. Meanwhile, a flustered Wen Ming was hiding under Ruyan's skirt, barely daring to breathe. Jia asked what was wrong, and Ruyan laughed it off, saying his sudden forcefulness had just startled her. From his hiding spot, Wen Ming noted that this courtesan's martial arts were suspiciously good, confirming she was up to something. A strange sight caught Wen Ming's eye, and a startled yelp escaped Ruyan's lips. Jia leered, suggesting she was trying to seduce him, but Ruyan denied it, her inner thoughts branding him an overconfident idiot. Ruyan fumed inwardly at the dead eunuch hiding under her skirt, wondering if he wanted to be thrown out, while Wen Ming squinted in the dim light. Jia made a move to climb onto the bed with her, and Ruyan frantically told him to wait. Running his hand along her arm, Jia remarked how soft her skin was for a Western woman. Ruyan steeled herself, ready to fight rather than let this fool take advantage of her. Jia continued his unwanted caress, then commented that she should shave her leg hair more often. Pausing, Jia repeated leg hair, in confusion, and Ruyan let out a bewildered huh? Ruyan cried out for Jia to stop as he reached for her skirt. In the chaos, Jia suddenly spotted Wen Ming and shouted in disbelief, "Wen Ming, what are you doing here?" Caught red-handed, Wen Ming stammered that he was just as confused and asked if Jia would even believe him. Jia Zhendao barked at Wen Ming to come out, but Wen Ming raised his hands, insisting that a gentleman settles things with words, not fists. Then Jia reminded him, "Are not you supposed to be a eunuch in the palace? Leaving without permission is a death sentence." Wen Ming stammered that he did not leave on his own. Eunuch Hai brought him out. Jia scoffed, claiming he had not seen Hai anywhere, and questioned why an old eunuch would ever come to a place like this. Meanwhile, hidden nearby, Eunuch Hai decided it was too risky to get further involved, so he retreated for now, planning to probe another time. Wen Ming tried to play the friendship card, begging Jia not to corner him, but Jia coldly replied it was far too late to call on their past bonds. Jia then unloaded his pent-up grudge back in school. Wen Ming repeatedly bullied him because they both admired the Empress, even falsely accusing Jia of soiling his pants in front of her, making her avoid him ever since. Later, when Jia tried to enter the palace through the imperial exams, Wen Ming switched his exam paper, causing him to fail miserably. Ruyan cut in, saying that was outright inhuman, to which Wen Ming awkwardly laughed it off as just a joke between friends. But Jia was not done. He declared that was not even the worst part. The most infuriating bit was after that failure. Wen Ming had the Empress assign Jia to be a stable master, forcing him to tend to horses. And for years, Jia lived a hellish life surrounded by horse manure. Wen Ming tried to defend himself, saying he heard Jia really liked horses. Then he added, "You have no idea how happy I was when I heard you got castrated. A respectable man like me could not resist coming to the Qinghua Tower to celebrate," and immediately he scolded himself for making excuses to visit a brothel. Jia sneered, "But I never expected to catch your crime of leaving the palace without permission. Rest assured, I will hand you over to the Empress for proper punishment." Wen Ming panicked, realizing Jia was dead serious. Seeing no mercy, Wen Ming declared, "Since you show no old friendship, do not blame me for what comes next." He lunged at Wen Ming shouting, "Die for me, young master." Jia was shocked, gasping, "What? How is that possible? When did you get this strong?" Jia revealed, "Naive fool, did you think I wasted my years like you? While living with those beasts, I mastered a secret technique," he proclaimed, 100% bare-handed horse manure catch, a hidden weapon skill. Wen Ming was caught off guard, and Jia pressed his advantage, declaring he would not let him live. Wen Ming screamed, "My father will kill you." Ruyan thought to herself, "This eunuch is my only way into the deep palace. Letting him die would ruin my plan. I was going to use this control technique later, but I have no choice now." She called out sweetly, "Young master, Jia, please wait. You rarely visit. How can you leave without sharing a drink with me? I feel so neglected," she added. "Besides, if you take him away right after arriving, the madam will blame me for poor hospitality." Jia realized his rudeness and apologized, admitting he had not thought it through, but he thought to himself, "My men are all outside anyway. He cannot escape," so he relented. "Since Miss Ruyan is so kind, I will stay and enjoy your company." Ruyan thanked him profusely. Jia promised, "I am in a good mood today. Serve me well, and you'll be richly rewarded." Ruyan expressed her gratitude. Wen Ming wondered, "Is she trying to help me? But what is her angle?" Ruyan raised a cup and said, "Come, young master Jia, let me feed you a drink." Jia grinned, "All right, hee." Ruyan gave a delicate cry of "ah" and pretended to drop the wine glass. Ruyan feigned a clumsy apology for spilling the wine, but Jia waved it off casually. Yet a subtle fragrance from her sleeve drifted toward him, carrying a hint of danger. She silently grinned. The poison was working. Jia's eyes glazed over as he stammered incoherently. Using her enchanted scent, she asked if he felt sleepy and eager to obey. Jia murmured a dazed yes. Wen Ming watched from the side, realizing she was actively controlling Jia's consciousness. Her technique and the tattoo on her arm confirmed to him that she was definitely part of that notorious organization. Ruing commanded him to forget he had seen anyone else. Jia blankly repeated her words. She declared that after a sleep, he would be completely under her control. But out of nowhere, Jia jolted awake and leaped to his feet. He grabbed Ruyan, accusing her of poisoning him and calling her a witch. Startled, she could only ask how he had broken the spell. Jia laughed triumphantly, explaining that years of dealing with horse manure had ruined his sense of smell, making her poison useless. Ruyan groaned about the horse manure's surprising versatility, while Jia condemned them both as conspirators and shoved her. He moved to strike, and Ruyan cried out as the attack landed. Wen Ming wondered why Jia did not catch the attack barehanded, but Ruyan noted the poison had slowed him down. Wen Ming grew suspicious, knowing martial arts and using poisons were not typical for a courtesan. Ruyan demurely said she only did it to save him. She insisted she had fallen for him instantly and could not stand by. Ruyan smirked, acknowledging he was different from other men, but still paused ominously. Wen Ming pressed for her true intentions, but she simply noted his lack of strength. She cooed that she just wanted his compliance and would not hurt him. Wen Ming backed away, scared, pleading for her to stop, but something inside him was about to burst, and he could not hold it any longer. Ruyan sensed a shift and asked what that was. Her face flushed as she gasped at the sheer size of it. Outside, the guards cynically joked about courtesans, sweet talk, unaware of the chaos inside. Ruyan stammered in disbelief, realizing the man before her was no eunuch, and desperately tried to explain it was all a misunderstanding. But she pointed angrily at the obvious evidence in his pants, refusing to accept any excuses. Cursing her bad intel, she tightened her grip, making him yelp in pain and beg her to stop. Her thoughts raced. If he was not a eunuch, she had been completely taken advantage of, and her reputation would be ruined if word got out. Deciding there was no other way, she resolved to kill him to silence the only witness to her disgrace. He yelped in shock and fear, not believing she was actually going through with it. Complaining about his rotten luck, he muttered that even a visit to a brothel had turned into a life-threatening mess. With a furious yell, she lunged at him, calling him a shameless lecher. He cried out, warning that killing him would ruin her mission for the Tianlian sect. She coyly denied any connection to the sect, but he bluntly called her out on her terrible lie and demanded she drop the knife. Feigning embarrassment, she admitted she might have overreacted just a little. Yet inwardly, she panicked, wondering how her identity had been exposed and if others knew, putting her in grave danger. She tried to brush it off, saying joining the Tianlian sect was a capital offense and he should not joke, but he insisted she drop the act. He coldly revealed that all Tianlian members bore a lotus mark on their bodies, which he had clearly seen, and she gasped in shock. Realizing he was the only one in the know, she decided killing him was still the safest option, but he quickly offered to help with the sect's mission in the capital. Suddenly, a loud commotion erupted as Sisi barged in, shouting for everyone to clear the way, while Wu Xin quietly told her not to be so conspicuous. Wu Xin wondered aloud why civilization would ever come to such a place. Sisi gleefully accused civilization of finally being caught red-handed in his improper activities. The guards tried to block Sisi, telling her to scram, but she demanded to know who they thought they were dealing with. Ignoring them, she shouted for civilization to come out immediately, with an explosion of energy in the background. Seeing Wu Xin, civilization called out in relief, saying she had perfect timing. He dropped to his knees and formally greeted her as emperor, but she hissed at him not to reveal her identity in such a place. She ordered him to get up quickly. Ruyan observed from the side, realizing this young woman was the infamous Emperor of Wu, much younger than she had imagined. She also noted the terrifying aura emanating from the emperor, rivaling even her own masters. Sisi accused civilization of coming to a brothel despite being a eunuch, and he protested that he was only brought there for a meal by the eunuch Hai. Sisi mocked him, asking if he expected her to believe that a meal ended with the courtesan on top of him, and he started to explain. Ruyan interrupted with a cold threat, warning him to watch his words, or she would take him down with her. Quickly thinking on his feet, civilization claimed Ruyan was actually a masseuse who had been working on his acupressure points when she fell on him, and she nodded along, while Sisi remained skeptical. Wu Xin, believing the story, asked for a massage, but Tao Si Si warned her not to trust him. Ruyan hesitated for a moment before meekly agreeing to the emperor's request. She shot a desperate glare at civilization, silently begging him to save her from the mess he created, but he just shrugged it off as her problem now. Furious at his betrayal, she silently vowed to drag him down with her if it came to that. Turning to the group with a sly smile, she announced that she had fallen on civilization because she discovered a huge secret about him. Before she could expose it, civilization interrupted loudly, claiming he too was a masseuse, leaving Ruyan stunned. He quickly explained that Ruyan had learned of his techniques and intentionally tackled him to test them out, a story the emperor found perfectly reasonable, though Sisi was having none of it. Panicking, the two conspirators whispered urgently to each other, agreeing they needed to find a scapegoat fast. But Sisi caught them exchanging glances and called them out on their suspicious behavior. She demanded to know why practicing massage required knocking someone unconscious on the floor, accusing them of hiding a sinister plot. Civilization launched into a dramatic sob story about how Jia Zhengdao, knowing he was a eunuch, had the eunuch Hai trick him into coming to the brothel to humiliate him, and he barely escaped with his life. Ruyan watched his performance with admiration. Emperor Wu Xin sympathized, saying Jia Zhengdao was too cruel to target a man just recovering, But Sisi warned her not to fall for his lies so easily. Sisi then declared she would simply wake up the unconscious Jia Zhengdao and expose their lies. Ignoring Civilization's pleas to stop, she shook the man awake. Jia Zhengdao blinked in confusion, wondering where he was and what had happened. Civilization's face fell as he realized the jig was up. There was no way to hide the truth now. Jia Zhengdao glared at Civilization, his voice dripping with accusation. Sisi jumped in, demanding that he spill all of Civilization's shady schemes. Zhengdao let out a mocking laugh, taunting that the guy had actually become a eunuch. What a pathetic joke. Both Sisi and Civilization froze, exchanging bewildered looks. Sisi pressed him, asking if that was all he had to say, but Zhengdao countered by asking if she was also an enemy, then insisted that becoming a eunuch was worth celebrating. In a hushed tone, Ruyan explained that her memory-erasing potion would make sure Zhengdao could not rat them out, and Civilization praised her as the demon sect's best. Meanwhile, Zhengdao muttered to himself, still fixated on the eunuch fact. He then burst out laughing, dreaming of replacing Civilization as the Empress's consort and claiming her for himself. But just then, the Empress herself, Wu Xin, appeared and asked sarcastically if he was so confident about becoming the consort, and Zhengdao, not recognizing her voice, boasted that his father, the Prime Minister, had already arranged everything. Wu Xin taunted him, pointing out that the Prime Minister could even arrange the Empress's consort. How impressive, and Zhengdao suddenly froze, realizing the voice. He spun around and stammered. Empress. Without mercy, Wu Xin coldly announced his father's demotion and ordered Zhengdao back to work at the stables, and he desperately tried to explain himself. With a casual slap, she sent him flying, warning him not to come near her, and Zhengdao yelped as he crashed to the ground. Ruyan watched from the shadows, realizing she was no match for the so-called dog emperor. A single backhand was terrifyingly powerful. Sisi asked if she might have killed him, but Wu Xin replied that she had controlled her strength, just enough to knock him silly without brain damage. Dazed and confused, Zhengdao slowly sat up, then suddenly jolted, as his memories came flooding back, including the truth about Civilization and that woman. Civilization and Ruyan exchanged horrified glances as they saw his memory returning. Civilization hissed at Ruyan, demanding to know why the memory loss was not working, and she explained that a blow to his head could trigger the return of lost memories. It was complicated. Panicking, Civilization realized he had to stop Zhengdao from spilling the beans, no matter what. Sisi eagerly urged Zhengdao to expose Civilization's crimes, and he started recounting what happened when he arrived, but Civilization quickly interrupted, pretending to notice something stuck to his butt. Before Zhengdao could react, Civilization yanked the knife out of his backside, spraying blood across Sisi's face, and she immediately fainted. Wu Xin caught the fainting Sisi, calling her name in concern. Civilization urged the Empress to take Sisi to a physician immediately, and Wu Xin agreed. He then offered to escort Zhengdao home safely, and Wu Xin nodded and carried Sisi away. Ruyan gave Civilization a sly smile, acknowledging his quick thinking. Without wasting time, Civilization asked Ruyan how to wipe Zhengdao's memory again. She told him a solid blow to the back of the head should do the trick, and Civilization grinned, appreciating the simplicity. He grabbed a random vase and declared it the memory erase vase. Raising the vase high, he prepared to strike, while a terrified Zhengdao asked what he was doing, and Civilization apologized, bringing the vase down with a sickening crack. A while later, Zhengdao lay unconscious with a massive bump on his head, and Civilization dusted off his hands and declared the job done. Civilization, trying to build rapport, suggested they were now allies after what they'd been through. Ruyan was not buying it, sneering that she had no interest in being comrades with a fake eunuch. But Civilization pressed on, pointing out that the Tianlian sect must have some goal in the capital, and having him as an inside man would be pretty useful. She raised an eyebrow, asking why she should trust him. That is when he dropped a bombshell. His father was the rebellious Zhenbei Marquis, and he hated the imperial court for ordering his castration. Ruyan dryly noted that he was not actually a eunuch. Civilization shot back that was exactly the proof of his treason, at least a death by 1,000 cuts. That convinced her, and she believed him, but told him to put his pants back on. He explained that the Empress was constantly watching him, and if she discovered the truth, he'd die a worse death than any cultist. Still, Ruyan said words alone were not enough to trust him. As Civilization started to ask how to prove his loyalty, Ruyan suddenly shoved a pill into his mouth. He choked and demanded to know what she had given him. Ruyan calmly explained it was the yin-yang harmony pill, and the effects would not kick in for 7 days. Civilization panicked, asking what happened after 7 days. She replied that without the antidote, he'd turn into a lust-driven beast, and his fake eunuch cover would be blown. He cried out that women were the most poisonous. Civilization complained that he was genuinely trying to help her, yet she still poisoned him. Ruyan assured him that if he cooperated, the pill would actually become a tonic. She ordered him to gather palace intelligence and meet her here in 7 days. Grudgingly, he agreed. But in his mind, Civilization was already plotting. Once his father's rebellion succeeded, he'd wipe out the Tianlian sect first. The scene shifted to that night in Civilization's room. A black-clad assassin crept in, moving silently and stealthily. It was Haigong, inwardly fuming that that brat Zhengdao had ruined his plans at the worst possible moment. Still, he had a backup plan. He approached a cup of water and discreetly slipped something into it. Haigong smirked to himself, thinking he still had a second option. From outside the room, voices interrupted Haigong's sneaky poisoning. Civilization protested. We've already proven it was a misunderstanding. Can you stop watching me like I am some thief? Sisi shot back. You just got lucky this time. A guilty conscience needs no accuser. But Civilization was not having any of that. I am not afraid of a guilty conscience, he muttered. I am afraid of what is hiding in the shadows. Talk about main character energy. Back in his room, Civilization noticed something off. I could have sworn I locked the windows before leaving, he thought. Is there really a ghost? Little did he know. Haigong had already slipped away clean. Sisi was not buying it. See? You were so distracted when you left. That just proves you have a guilty conscience. Civilization snapped back. Guilty my foot. You've been hassling me all day, and I have not even had a sip of water. Thirsty as hell. Civilization grabbed the cup of water that Haigong had poisoned, completely unaware. Meanwhile, Haigong watched from the roof, grinning like a maniac. Haigong's inner voice cheered. That is right. Drink up. You are thirsty, so down it goes. Bruh, this guy is cooked. Just as Civilization was about to take a sip, Sisi snatched the cup away. Wait, Sisi declared. This cup is mine. I have been working hard all day too. Civilization fumed. You jerk. You are going to fight me over a cup of water. Even Haigong muttered the same line under his breath. Absolute chaos. Sisi paused. Huh? Did I hear someone else's voice? Civilization shrugged. Probably just an echo. Sisi decided she did not care. Forget it. I am dying of thirst. And she chugged the entire cup. Sisi let out a satisfied sigh. Ah, that is the stuff. Civilization could not help but comment. Really? You had to make drinking water look so suggestive. Haigong was furious. Damn it. Why does someone always mess up my plans? Well, at least that aphrodisiac works on both sexes. When the girl's dose kicks in, I can still use her to test Civilization. Sisi said. Do not be so petty. Go fetch your own water from the yard. Civilization grumbled. You unreasonable girl. So Civilization trudged to the well to get a drink. But he found a sign on the well. A eunuch committed suicide in this well today. He was temporarily suspended. Get water at Yihei Garden 2 lie away. Civilization was exasperated. Who in their right mind would go to Yihei Garden in the middle of the night? Haigong gloated from his hiding spot. That aphrodisiac is deadly without ice water. You are not escaping my scheme tonight, kid. Talk about a villain with a plan. Defeated, Civilization returned to his room. Guess I will have to wait until tomorrow to get water from the Imperial kitchen. But then Sisi started acting oddly. You are really thirsty, are not you? She asked. Yeah. So funny. I am feeling really hot and thirsty too. Sisi moved closer. Let us find a way to quench our thirst right now. Civilization backed away. What are you doing? She got right in his face. Do not come so close, he yelped. Wah? He shoved her off. What the hell? That was my first kiss. I have not even kissed my darling yet. But Sisi was not satisfied. Not enough. She lunged again. Not enough. Civilization screamed. You demoness. Stop messing around. Civilization's mind raced. She has been drugged. Has not she? Did my yin-yang harmony pill have some contagious effect? Or maybe this is still a test to see if I am really a eunuch, he thought. Sisi moaned. Come on. I need more. Haigong urged silently. Go on, girl. Get his secret out of him. Sisi chased Civilization around. Do not run. They ended up back at the well. Sisi grabbed at his pants. This'll quench my thirst for sure. Civilization yelled. Get your hands off my pants. Absolute madness. He was convinced that this demoness was testing him, and he would not let a bit of beauty make him reveal a flaw. Main character energy indeed. So he grabbed her and dragged her toward the well, feigning surprise at her strength, and with a splash both of them tumbled into the well. He thought that now in the water she would not be able to test him. Talk about a dramatic escape. Above ground, Haigong fumed, cursing that no one ever followed his plan, but a chirping bird flew past, catching his attention. Meanwhile, Giovanni was absolutely furious. He berated his son for visiting a brothel and getting caught by the Empress, which caused his own demotion 3 ranks. Zhengdao tried to explain, blaming Civilization for humiliating him before the Empress. But Jiaranyi retorted that being outsmarted by a powerless eunuch only proved how useless he was. Nevertheless, he acknowledged Zhengdao as his son and vowed to settle the score with Civilization. Zhengdao quickly praised his father. Jiaranyi grounded him for 3 months, ordering him to study and stay out of trouble. But then he noticed something odd. He asked about Zhengdao's leg injury. The servant replied that Civilization had stabbed him with a dagger. The servant produced the very dagger, having preserved it as evidence. Jiaranyi examined it closely. He recognized the mark of the Tianlian sect on the handle. In the 14th year of the Chuyuan era, a devastating flood left countless refugees homeless, with dikes collapsing, and the northern lands of the Wu dynasty yielding no harvest. Legend has it that a saint, riding a white donkey, came from the west, and with a wave of his sleeve, could produce food to aid the victims and guide the souls of the dead. But the corrupt local officials, unable to tolerate the saint's charity, sent soldiers and constables to arrest both him and the refugees. To their surprise, the saint's white donkey transformed into a peerless strongman, who drove away the government lackeys and saved thousands of people. From then on, the Tianlian sect rose, and the saint appeared. Believers in life would find happiness, and believers in death would reach the Pure Land. Jirenyi presented the findings of the Dawu investigation, concluding that this was the origin of the Tianlian sect, and his servant immediately labeled it rebellion and treason. Jirenyi agreed, adding that the Tianlian sect seemed to have deep ties with the Wen family. The servant said he would prepare the sedan chair, but Jirenyi was in no hurry, noting that a single dagger was not sufficient evidence. He offered 100 silver taels as a reward for anyone who could provide key information on the young master of the Wen family, but the servant thought it was too little. Jirenyi retorted that 100 taels was nearly half his monthly salary, to which the servant reminded him that he was the minister of both the Ministry of Works and the Ministry of Revenue. Relenting, Jirenyi said he had another 10 taels hidden in his shoe, but insisted his wife must not know, and the servant assured him it was enough. The servant suggested he should simply embezzle more, noting that the reward for the Minister of Rights, lost dog, was 4,000 taels. Jirenyi scoffed at the notion of money. He declared his plan to expose the Wen family's conspiracy before the emperor at a banquet in 3 days, which would restore his rank and allow him to become a prince consort, bringing wealth. With a dark thought, Jirenyi vowed to kill Wen Ming, for both public and private reasons. The scene shifted to the well where Wen Ming and Sisi had fallen. Wen Ming thought he was clever for escaping the madwoman's test by jumping into the well, but then he realized she had actually passed out, and exclaimed in shock. He worried that if she died, Empress Wu Xin would never forgive him. So he grabbed the rope and pulled Sisi out of the water. Exhausted, he panted, and regretted dragging her into the well in the first place. He called out to her, afraid she might be dead. Relieved to find she still had a pulse, but frustrated she showed no sign of waking up. Determined, he prepared to take action. Thanks to his pre-transmigration first aid knowledge, he was eager to try CPR for real. He could not help noticing that this crazy woman was even more well-endowed than Empress Wu Xin, but he quickly scolded himself, remembering he was a eunuch and should only be loyal to his empress. After she coughed up water but remained unconscious, he concluded he had to move to the next step. He tried to remember if he needed to tilt her chin back. Sisi vaguely whispered his name, while Wen Ming urged himself to keep going and not let her die, and she wondered why he looked so anxious. As Sisi thought that someone who should hate her was showing such concern, Wen Ming declared he would give her mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. Sisi suddenly came to and, in a panic, decked Wen Ming across the face, demanding to know what he thought he was doing to her. Talk about a rude awakening. Wen Ming tried to explain he was saving her life, but Sisi was not buying it. She had never heard of kissing as a rescue method, and even that woman had not taught her that. Brushing it off, Wen Ming just said, well, at least she was alive, and that was what mattered. But Sisi's mind raced. After being hit, he still seemed concerned. Maybe he actually liked her, but that would complicate things with Empress Wu Xin. Wen Ming pointed out it was late and suggested they dry off and head back to rest. Seeing her still spaced out, he added, what was she waiting for? Sisi snapped out of it and told him sternly to please stop making things difficult for Her Majesty. Wen Ming was completely taken aback. Meanwhile, the scene shifted to the palace's internal affairs office, specifically Eunuch Hai's quarters. Eunuch Hai received a secret letter. In 3 days, when the northern barbarian envoys arrived, he was to poison the imperial feast and cause chaos. He scoffed at the plan. The empress's banquets were heavily guarded with silver needles and food tasters. Poison alone seemed laughable. But then a figure appeared, assuring him that the prince had everything covered. Eunuch Hai recognized him instantly as Huang Tianli. Haigong remarked that the prince must be quite confident to have deployed Tianli himself. Tianli humbly responded that they were both indispensable to the prince's scheme. He offered to stay in the capital to aid Haigong, who politely thanked him. But inwardly, Haigong wondered if the prince had sent Tianli to spy on him. Just then, Tianli produced a poison, claiming it was colorless and odorless, undetectable even by silver needles. Haigong pointed out that eunuchs and maids always taste the food first, but Tianli assured him this poison was specially made, taking at least half a day to take effect. The poison would cause the lungs to wither like autumn leaves, leading to a slow, irreversible suffocation. Once taken, there was no escape. Haigong gasped in shock at such a lethal poison and demanded to know its name. With a smirk, Tianli revealed it was called Baicao, the herbal killer. 7 days later, in the royal garden, Sisi lay on the ground, completely out of breath. She grumbled about having to pull weeds when she was a genius, even if it was for the upcoming envoy from the northern barbarians. Her eyes landed on Civilization, who was sitting idle, looking suspicious. Sisi crept up behind him and called him out for slacking off. Civilization jumped and nervously claimed he was just taking a short break. But Sisi was not fooled. She demanded to see what he was hiding. Civilization quickly explained it was just notes on handling the northern envoy. Internally, Sisi suspected he might be trying to reach his father through the envoy instead. She called his bluff and lunged to grab the paper. Civilization pleaded with her not to. But Sisi was stronger and pinned him down, declaring she would not let him off this time. Frustrated, Civilization could not help but notice how annoyingly good the demoness's figure was. He realized that staying in this position would definitely expose the fact that he was not a eunuch, but shifting would blow his cover for the intelligence he was gathering for Lu Ruyan. Caught between two disasters, he had no idea what to do. Just then, a voice rang out, announcing the arrival of the female emperor. Wu Xin appeared and saw the two of them in a compromising position, clearly flustered. She demanded to know what they were doing in broad daylight. Sisi immediately claimed she suspected Civilization was up to something harmful. Wu Xin asked if Sisi was telling the truth. Civilization vehemently denied it, asking how he could ever plot against her. He even offered to let them search him, saying there was nothing strange on him. Sisi began to doubt herself, but Sisi was not fully convinced, suggesting it could be hidden in his clothing lining. Civilization protested that it was inappropriate to do such a search in front of the Empress. Wu Xin gave Sisi a firm knock on the head. She told Sisi to stop bullying Civilization and ordered her to come along, pulling her ear. Once they were gone, Civilization heaved a sigh of relief, thinking that if he had not practiced his Kegel exercises daily, he would have been exposed. But he knew the 7-day deadline was nearly up, and he really needed to go exchange for the antidote from Lu Ruyan. Holding the palace defense map, Civilization silently hoped it would be enough to win Lu Ruyan's trust. Meanwhile, Haigong was deep in thought, worrying that if the prince succeeded with the poison, his own plans would be ruined. He needed to find the Wen family's cultivation method before anyone caught on. At the palace gate, Civilization casually told the guard that Haigong had sent him to buy supplies for the northern envoy, and the guard waved him through without a second thought. Thanking the guard, Civilization slipped out, but little did he know, Haigong was watching from the shadows, suspicious of why the young man was using his name to leave the palace. It did not take long for the eunuch to piece it together. Civilization was definitely heading out to search for his family's secret technique. A stroke of luck, Haigong thought, feeling that the heavens were on his side. His grand scheme was about to come together. Back inside the palace, Empress Wu Xin ordered her attendants to wait outside as she entered her private chambers. Seated at the table, she told Sisi that after days of monitoring Civilization with no signs of trouble, maybe he was innocent after all. But Sisi was not convinced. She insisted that the guy was definitely hiding something, and that they could not let their guard down. Having caught him acting suspicious multiple times, she just needed more time to catch him red-handed. In response, Wu Xin let out a long, thoughtful "oh." Calling attention to her unusual persistence, Wu Xin remarked that it was rare for Sisi to keep going after so many failed attempts, to which Sisi replied that she only wanted to help. Finally, Wu Xin asked if Sisi had developed feelings for Civilization. Sisi's eyes went wide and she practically screamed, "What? How is that even possible? Talk about a denial that came straight from the gut." She immediately went on a defensive rampage, insisting there was no way she'd ever like that guy, calling him a eunuch and declaring he was not worthy of her genius self. "Wow, the lady doth protest too much, huh?" Wu Xin just smiled knowingly and said she understood, leaving Sisi confused and asking, "Sister Wu Xin?" as if hoping for clarification. Wu Xin calmly pointed out that Civilization was indeed smart and handsome, and even if Sisi did have feelings, she would not blame her. But Sisi kept insisting she was not listening. Talk about a one-sided conversation. Sisi finally asked if Wu Xin had called her over for something more serious than petty jealousy. Wu Xin admitted the real reason was to discuss how to handle the northern barbarian envoys, and Sisi, with a sigh, said she figured as much. Wu Xin explained the situation. The Zhenbeiho had rebelled, but the northern barbarians had not taken advantage of the chaos. Instead, they'd sent envoys, which was highly suspicious. Something definitely did not add up. With a confident grin, Sisi said she'd already thought of that, and proudly presented a map of the kingdom. Wu Xin asked if it was their country's map. Wu Xin pointed to Yanyun Pass, the key stronghold held by the rebellious Marquis. Now that it was lost, both the barbarians and the Marquis were sitting still, which was unnerving. Sisi laid out her deduction. The rebellion was so sudden that the Marquis had not even warned his son Civilization to leave. Once the barbarians marched south, the Emperor would definitely order Civilization's execution, she continued, reasoning that the cunning Marquis knew the Emperor valued loyalty and would not kill Civilization immediately, which explained why the barbarians were acting so strangely. Wu Xin had to agree. But Wu Xin pointed out the contradiction. If Civilization was in the capital, the Marquis would be at a stalemate. Sisi smiled and said, "That is exactly why the barbarians came." With a dramatic flourish, Sisi declared that the truth was obvious. The envoys were not here to negotiate at all. Their real mission was to secretly rescue Civilization. Talk about a big brain move. Wu Xin was shocked by the depth of the plot and immediately called for her trusted subordinate, Wei Jueyao, who responded promptly. She asked if the barbarian envoys had already entered the city, and how long until they arrived at the palace, but Jueyao reported that the 3 envoys had not followed the planned route. Instead, they had diverted to a place called Chonghua Pavilion. Both Wu Xin and Sisi exclaimed in unison, Chunghua Pavilion. The shock was real. Sisi's eyes lit up as she declared she finally understood everything. She urged Wu Xin to go there immediately, insisting that the truth was waiting at Chunghua Pavilion. Meanwhile, at the very same pavilion, Civilization found himself surrounded by flirtatious women. He quickly said he was just looking for someone and would leave right away. The ladies tried to coax him into staying, teasing him to have a few drinks first. Civilization thought to himself that no matter how many times he came here, it was always too intense. He had to grab the antidote and get out fast. Suddenly, a rough voice shouted, demanding to see the person in charge. A thug barked at the crowd to make way for his master. The northern barbarian ambassador Bator stepped in and asked if this was the famous Chonghua Pavilion, the best in the capital. The madam welcomed them warmly, but one of the barbarians immediately demanded the most beautiful women, complaining that the two barbarian lords had been waiting too long. The madam nervously agreed and said she'd arrange everything, inviting them inside. But under her breath, she whispered to a maid to prepare the guards and also notify the authorities, because these guys did not look like good news. Meanwhile, the deputy envoy Obu reminded Bator not to forget their real mission. Bator grumbled that even a condemned man deserves a good last meal. Bator's eyes then fell on a particular lady, Ruyan, and he started sizing her up. Bator grabbed Ruyan and insisted she come with him, ignoring her protests. From a distance, Civilization noticed the trio's barbarian attire and identified them as northerners. A thug spotted him staring and threatened to gouge his eyes out. Civilization backed off, claiming he had nothing to do with the girl. The thug sneered, calling all Wuchao people cowards. Civilization figured they were just ordinary barbarians, not the envoys he needed to interrogate. But then the poison struck. Civilization felt an unbearable pressure below and knew he was running out of time as Haigong, tailing him secretly, realized with a smirk that the secret manual must be hidden in this very pavilion. Civilization whispered desperately to Ruyan, begging her to save him before he lost control. Just then, Ruyan burst out of her room, and Civilization crashed into her. Both cried out in surprise. Ruyan scolded him for his carelessness, and he retorted that she should not have been behind the door. She ordered him to get up, hinting there was more to discuss. She warned him to control his third leg or she would make him a real eunuch. He shot back that it was all thanks to her poison. He closed the door and said they would talk about that later. He handed over the palace defense map and begged for the antidote. Ruyan was impressed. He got it so quickly. She told him to eat the pill so she could question him about the palace situation. As he swallowed the antidote, Civilization felt a wave of relief, thinking he was finally free from her control. But the door behind him swung open, and he stumbled, losing the precious pill. His cry of despair echoed as the antidote fell to the floor. It was Bator who had opened the door, stepping into the room with an air of authority. Bator asked if this was the most beautiful girl in the pavilion, while Civilization, hidden under the doorframe, cursed the terrible timing.